I guess every story like this starts with love. At least, I thought it was love. My name is Mark, and for 15 years, I was married to Lisa. We met in our early 20s, fresh out of college, full of dreams and promises of forever. She was 3 years older than me, but back then, it didn't matter. If anything, I admired her confidence, her maturity. I thought we had something unbreakable. But love isn't enough, not when cracks start forming beneath the surface. We had 2 kids, a house, and a life that, on paper, looked perfect. Yet, somewhere along the way, things changed. It started small. The intimacy faded first. At first, it was just long gaps, then months, then years. We tried therapy, but she confessed one day, almost casually, that she just didn't feel that way anymore. Maybe I'm just frigid, she had said with a shrug, like we were discussing the weather. It was like a slap in the face, but I swallowed it. What else was I supposed to do? Years passed. I told myself it was fine, that we were still a team, still a family. But the truth was, I felt like a ghost in my own marriage. I fell into mild depression, nothing dramatic, just a dull, constant weight. I worked, I took care of the kids, and I lived in a house where I felt more like a roommate than a husband. And then, she changed. Lisa reconnected with old friends, people she hadn't talked to in years. Most of them were divorced. She started spending more time away, coming home late with vague excuses. And when she was home, she was distant. Not just physically but emotionally, too. Conversations turned to arguments. She rolled her eyes at me a lot. I felt like an annoyance rather than a partner. One night, I overheard her on the phone, laughing, whispering. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard enough, something about how, it must be nice to be free. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of the end. Looking back, I don't know if I was just blind or if I didn't want to see it. Maybe a little of both. When you've been with someone for over a decade, you learn to ignore the little warning signs because admitting the truth means admitting failure. Lisa had always been independent, but suddenly, she was a ghost. Nights out with friends became entire weekends where she was too tired to talk when she got home. Her phone, which used to be an afterthought, was now practically glued to her hand. She'd tilt the screen away from me when a message popped up, or she'd leave the room to take a call. Who was that? I asked one night as she walked back into the living room, tucking her phone into her pocket. Oh, just Sarah. Sarah. The friend she hadn't spoken to in years. The friend who had divorced her husband and was now living her best life, traveling and dating younger men. Lisa started dressing differently too. It was subtle at first, nicer clothes, more makeup, new perfume. I wanted to believe she was just trying to feel good about herself, but deep down, I knew better. She wasn't dressing up for me. One night, I decided to push. You've been going out a lot lately. Feels like I barely see you anymore. She sighed, barely looking up from her phone. I just need space, Mark. I feel like I lost myself in this marriage. I didn't know what to say to that. How do you argue with someone who says they feel trapped? I wanted to tell her I felt trapped too. That I'd been lonely for years. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, swallowed my pride, and pretended everything was fine. Then came the night I found out. It was a stupid accident. Our iCloud accounts were still linked from when we set up our devices ages ago. I had been trying to fix a syncing issue on my phone when suddenly, a flood of new photos started appearing in my shared album. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I opened the first picture. Lisa. Not just Lisa, Lisa in lingerie I had never seen before, posing in a way she never had for me. My stomach dropped. My hands shook as I scrolled. More pictures. Videos. And then, the worst part, I recognized the man. A mutual friend. Someone I had invited into my home, shared drinks with, laughed with. I sat there, frozen. My mind was screaming, but my body wouldn't move. I don't know how long I stared at that screen before I finally forced myself to breathe. My ears were ringing, my vision blurred, and I could feel my heartbeat pounding against my ribs. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to punch something. I wanted it to not be real. But it was. Lisa came home an hour later, humming to herself as she set her purse down. She barely glanced at me as she walked past, heading toward the kitchen. And that was the moment I decided, I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I sat in the living room, phone in hand, heart pounding like a war drum. I had two choices: pretend I hadn't seen anything and let this fester inside me like poison, or face it head on. Lisa walked into the kitchen, oblivious. I heard her pouring a glass of wine, humming some song under her breath. The normalcy of it made my skin crawl. I stood up. My legs felt weak, like I'd just been hit by something massive. But I forced myself to move. I walked into the kitchen and placed my phone on the counter, screen up, displaying one of the photos, the one where she was lying on a hotel bed, wearing red lingerie I had never seen before. Want to explain this? My voice came out steady, but I felt anything but. She froze, the wine glass halfway to her lips. Slowly, she set it down, staring at the screen. I watched the color drain from her face. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything, just stood there, shoulders tense, lips slightly parted like she was searching for words that wouldn't come. Then, the denial. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice sharp, defensive. I let out a bitter laugh. "That's what you're worried about? Not the fact that you're screwing around with someone we both know?" She exhaled, running a hand through her hair, pacing now. "Mark, it's not what you think. That line. That cliché, overused, insulting line. Not what I think." I grabbed the phone and scrolled. More pictures. A video. I turned it toward her. "Then explain this." Her face twisted in something between shame and frustration. She knew she was caught. There was no way to lie her way out of this. Finally, she sighed. "It just happened." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. "It just happened. That's what you're going with?" She crossed her arms, staring at the floor. "I felt dead inside for years, Mark. We haven't been intimate in, how long? 7 years. I needed to feel something." I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. "And you couldn't talk to me about that?" "You had to," I gestured to the phone, disgusted. "Do this?" She shook her head. "Would it have mattered? You don't touch me. You don't even look at me like you used to." That hit hard. But the difference was, I had been willing to fix it. I had begged for us to work on things. She had chosen to betray me instead. I took a deep breath, trying to control the storm brewing inside me. "How long?" She hesitated. That alone told me it had been longer than I could stomach. "A year." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "A year. A full year of lies. A year of her looking me in the eye and pretending." I pressed my hands against the counter, grounding myself. Was it just him? Silence. That told me everything. My stomach twisted. Jesus Christ, Lisa. She finally looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something other than guilt. I saw annoyance. Like I was inconveniencing her with my emotions. "What do you want me to say, Mark?" she snapped. "That I'm sorry. That I regret it." "Fine, I'm sorry. But it's not like we were happy. I was miserable, and so were you." I let out a cold, humorless laugh. "So that makes it okay?" She didn't answer. I pushed back from the counter, shaking my head. "I can't do this right now." She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "Mark." I pulled away. "Don't." The room felt suffocating. My own house, my own kitchen, and I felt like a stranger in it. I needed air, space, anything but this. I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there with nothing but the truth between us. I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, into the cold night air, but nothing could clear the suffocating weight pressing on my chest. My mind was a hurricane, flashes of the photos, her words, the way she had looked at me, not with guilt, not with remorse, but with frustration. Like I was the problem for reacting. I didn't get in my car. I didn't even know where I'd go. Instead, I sat on the front steps, my elbows on my knees, hands gripping my face. My marriage, 15 years of my life, had been a lie. How many nights had I laid beside her in bed while she was sneaking off to message him? How many times had she smiled at me, kissed me goodbye, then turned around and given herself to someone else? A year. And from her silence, I knew it wasn't just one affair. How many more had there been? How long had I been the fool? The front door creaked open behind me. I didn't look up. "Mark," Lisa said softly. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Don't." She sighed. "We need to talk." I let out a bitter laugh, finally glancing at her over my shoulder. "Now you want to talk? After a year of lying to my face?" She stepped onto the porch, arms crossed over her chest. "I don't know what you want from me." I turned to face her fully, standing up. "I wanted a wife who didn't cheat on me." She flinched, but the sympathy was short-lived. Her face hardened. "You think this is all on me?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you seriously trying to justify this?" She threw her hands up. "Mark, our marriage has been dead for years. I've felt invisible. And you just let it happen. You never fought for me, for us." I clenched my jaw. "I did. I begged for us to go to therapy. I tried to fix things. You're the one who gave up." She scoffed. "And what? You expected me to wait around forever for something that was never coming back." I shook my head, the anger boiling in my chest. "Then why the hell didn't you just leave? Why not tell me you were done instead of sneaking around like a coward?" She looked away, biting her lip, and for a brief second, I saw it, guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that same defensive wall she always put up when things got uncomfortable. "I didn't want to hurt you," she muttered. I barked out a laugh, sharp and humorless. "Bullshit. You didn't want to lose your safety net. You wanted to keep me around while you had your fun." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she didn't deny it. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, I exhaled, forcing my hands to unclench. "I'm done, Lisa." She blinked. "What?" I met her eyes, letting the finality settle in. "I'm done with this. With you." Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. Maybe she hadn't expected me to make the choice for her. Maybe she thought I'd beg, that I'd fight for a marriage she had already thrown away. But I was done fighting for someone who had stopped caring a long time ago. She swallowed, nodding stiffly. "Fine." I turned and walked back inside, heading straight for the bedroom. I grabbed a duffel bag, threw in enough clothes for a few days, and before she could say anything else, I walked out. This wasn't my home anymore. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I drove aimlessly through the dark streets, my fingers gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The air felt heavier than usual, like it was pressing down on me, making it harder to breathe. 15 years. A house. 2 kids. A life built together. And she threw it away. For what? Some thrill. Some attention she claimed I didn't give her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something. I wanted to erase every memory of her, every touch, every smile, every whispered, "I love you," that had clearly meant nothing. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of a cheap motel. I had no plan, no luggage, just the duffel bag with a few clothes I had grabbed on my way out. The guy at the front desk barely looked at me as I handed over my card. 10 minutes later, I was in a dimly lit room that smelled faintly of old cigarettes and cheap air freshener. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. What now? Divorce? That was inevitable. But what about the kids? How would I tell them? How much would Lisa fight for custody when she'd barely been around for them lately? And what about everything else? The house, the finances, the years we spent building something that was now in ruins? I laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, but sleep didn't come. My mind kept replaying every moment leading up to this, every missed sign, every excuse I had ignored. I thought about the first time we met. The way she used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. The way I used to feel when she'd curl up next to me at night. Had it all been a lie? Had I just been a placeholder until something better came along? My phone buzzed on the nightstand, dragging me out of my spiral. Lisa. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, I picked up, my voice hoarse. What? Silence. Then a shaky breath. Where are you? I closed my eyes. Why does it matter? She hesitated. Because, we need to talk. I let out a dry laugh. We already did. Mark, please. That word. Please. There was a time I would have done anything for her. A time when hearing her ask for something would have made me move mountains. But that time was gone. You made your choice, Lisa, I said, my voice cold. Now live with it. I hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, half expecting her to call again. But she didn't. And somehow, that hurt even more. The motel room was silent, but my mind was screaming. Sleep wasn't an option. My thoughts clawed at me, dragging me back to the images, the lies, the sheer audacity of Lisa's betrayal. I sat up and ran my hands through my hair, exhaling sharply. My phone sat beside me on the nightstand, dark and silent. No more calls. No texts. She had given up that easily. Maybe she thought I'd come crawling back. Maybe she assumed I'd cool off, return home, and we'd go back to pretending like we hadn't just ripped our marriage apart. She didn't know me at all. I needed to do something, anything, before I lost my mind. So I grabbed my phone, opened my messages, and scrolled to the one person I knew I could trust. Me, you up. A few seconds passed before the typing bubble appeared. Jake, dude, it's almost midnight. You okay? Jake had been my best friend since college, the guy who had seen me through every major event in my life, my wedding, the birth of my kids, the slow unraveling of my marriage. He had told me years ago that something felt off about Lisa, but I hadn't wanted to hear it. I should have listened. Me, can I crash at your place for a few days? A pause. Then. Jake, shit. What happened? I stared at the screen. How do you sum up 15 years of betrayal in a text message? Me, Lisa cheated. For a year. With someone we both know. The response was instant. Jake, I swear to God, tell me who, and I'll handle it. I almost smiled. That was Jake, always ready to throw a punch for the people he cared about. But this wasn't something that could be fixed with a fight. Me, it doesn't matter. I just need somewhere to think. Jake, you don't even have to ask. Get over here. I grabbed my keys and left the motel without a second thought. The drive to Jake's was quiet, just the hum of the engine and the occasional flash of streetlights. I felt numb. Tired. Like my body was moving on autopilot while my brain tried to process the wreckage. By the time I pulled up to his apartment, he was already waiting at the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. As soon as I stepped inside, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to say anything yet, man. Just sit down." I sank onto his couch, exhaling heavily. He handed me a beer, sat across from me, and waited. After a long pause, I finally spoke. "I found out by accident. iCloud sync. Photos. Videos." Jake's jaw tightened. "Jesus, Mark." I nodded. And when I confronted her, she barely even cared. He shook his head, taking a swig of his drink. "That's because she's been checked out for years, man. You were the last to realize it." That stung. Because deep down, I knew he was right. We sat in silence for a while. Then Jake spoke again, his voice quieter. "What's next?" I stared at the beer in my hands. "That's the part one don't know." I sat on Jake's couch long after our conversation had died down, staring at the bottle in my hands. The beer was warm now, untouched. My mind wouldn't shut up long enough for me to even think about drinking it. "What's next?" I had no answer. Jake sighed and leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Look, man, I know this is fresh, and you probably feel like your brain is running in circles, but you need to start thinking about yourself now." I ran a hand down my face. "My kids. That's all I care about right now." He nodded. "Then start there. You staying in this marriage for them was pointless anyway. Lisa checked out a long time ago. At this point, you've got to make sure she doesn't screw them over the way she screwed you over." That hit hard. Because the thing was, I hadn't even let myself go there yet. Lisa had barely been present in their lives for the past year. She was always out, always busy, and when she was home, she wasn't really there. The kids had noticed. I knew they had. They didn't say anything, but kids pick up on things. What happens when the divorce starts? Will she suddenly pretend to be supermom? Or worse, will she prioritize her new life over them entirely? I swallowed hard. "I need full custody." Jake nodded like he had already expected me to say that. "Then get a lawyer. Fast." I exhaled. That was the next step, wasn't it? A lawyer. Custody agreements. Splitting assets. The house. The money. The logistics of ending a marriage that had already been dead for years. And Lisa? How would she react when she realized this wasn't just a fight that would blow over? When she realized I was actually leaving? A bitter chuckle slipped from my lips. "You know the worst part?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "She hasn't even tried to stop me. Not a single text after the call I ignored. Not a single effort to find out where I went. She didn't care." Jake scoffed. "Because she's been preparing for this longer than you have." I knew he was right. Lisa had been emotionally checked out for so long that maybe she really did think this would all be easy. Maybe she thought I'd just roll over, split everything down the middle, and let her waltz into her new life without consequences. I stood up, setting the beer down on the table. "I need to get my kids." Jake frowned. "Right now?" "Yeah." I grabbed my keys. "I'm not letting her decide when she gets to be a parent." He didn't try to stop me. He just nodded. "You need backup, you call me." I didn't even respond. I was already halfway out the door. For the first time since this nightmare started, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The drive back to the house was a blur. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my fingers ached, my mind laser-focused on one thing, my kids. Lisa could do whatever the hell she wanted with her life. She could run around with whatever loser she had replaced me with, but I wasn't about to let her drag our children into her mess. I pulled into the driveway just after 2 a.m. The house was dark except for the faint glow from the living room. She was still up. Good. I stepped inside without knocking. It was still my damn house, after all. Lisa was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, phone in hand. When she saw me, she straightened, her expression unreadable. "You're back," she said flatly. I ignored her. "Where are the kids?" Her brows furrowed. "Asleep." "Why?" I crossed my arms, my voice calm but firm. "I'm taking them with me." She blinked. "What?" I took a slow breath, keeping my temper in check. "I'm not going to play games, Lisa. You want it out? Fine. But I'm not going to let you half-ass parenting while you figure out your new life. The kids come with me." She scoffed. "Oh, so you just get to decide that?" "Yeah," I said simply. "Because I've actually been here for them. You've been too busy sneaking around and pretending this family doesn't exist." Her face twisted in anger. "That's not fair." I let out a bitter laugh. "Fair? You think any of this is fair? You lied to me. You lied to them. And now you expect me to just trust that you'll suddenly start being a mother again?" She stood up, arms crossed. "You don't get to take my kids away from me, Mark. They're not just your kids." I took a step closer. "And let's be real, you've barely been around lately. They've been second place to whatever the hell you've been doing. I'm not going to let them be an afterthought." For a second, something flickered in her eyes, maybe guilt, maybe realization. But then it was gone, replaced by cold defiance. "This is our house," she said. "You can't just take them in the middle of the night." I exhaled sharply. "Fine. Then I'll be back in the morning. And I'll have my lawyer with me." Her face paled. "Yeah." She hadn't thought that far ahead. I turned and started toward the stairs, but her voice stopped me. "Mark, please." I paused. That word again. Please. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel love or pain or even anger. I just felt, done. "You made your choice, Lisa." My voice was quiet, but firm. "Now live with it." I went upstairs to check on my kids. Tomorrow, everything would change. I barely slept that night. I sat in the chair in my kids' room, watching them breathe, listening to the soft rhythm of their sleep. They had no idea their world was about to change. By the time the first rays of light filtered through the blinds, I knew what I had to do. I left the house without waking them, drove to a nearby diner, and made 2 phone calls, one to a lawyer and one to my mother. The lawyer picked up first. "I need full custody," I said before he even had the chance to introduce himself. There was a pause. Then, calmly, he asked, "Are you in immediate danger? Are your children?" "No," I said. "But their mother, she's been absent for a long time, and now she's made it clear where her priorities lie. I can't let them be collateral damage in whatever midlife crisis she's having." The lawyer sighed. "It won't be easy. Unless there's proof of neglect, the courts usually push for shared custody." "I have proof that she's been unfaithful," I said. "Does that count?" He hesitated. "Morally? Absolutely. Legally? Not necessarily. Infidelity only matters if it directly affects the kids, if she's been putting them in unsafe situations, spending marital assets on her affair, or showing signs of abandonment." I clenched my jaw. "She moved out last night." "That's a start," he admitted. "We can use that to argue she's prioritizing her personal life over her children. I'll need documentation, texts, proof that she hasn't been around, anything that shows a pattern of neglect." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I have plenty." "Good. Then let's get started. By the time I hung up, my coffee was cold. I barely noticed. Then I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. "Mark?" My voice nearly cracked. "Mom, I need help." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Come home. Bring the kids." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I don't know if Lisa's going to fight this. "She can fight all she wants," my mother said sharply. "The question is, does she want to be a mother, or does she just want to win?" I had a feeling I already knew the answer. By 8 a.m., I was back at the house. The kids were awake, rubbing the sleep from their eyes as I helped them get dressed. Lisa was nowhere to be seen. When I stepped downstairs with their overnight bags, she was in the kitchen, standing by the sink, gripping a coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes met mine, tired and wary. "You're really doing this," she murmured. "I have to," I said simply. "For them." Her lips pressed together. She looked away. "So that's it?" I glanced at my kids, then back at her. "You tell me." She didn't answer. I walked out the door with my children, not looking back. The drive to my mom's house was quiet. Too quiet. The kids, usually full of questions and chatter, just stared out the window, sensing something was wrong but not knowing exactly what. Finally, my son, Ethan, spoke up. "Dad, where's Mom?" I gripped the wheel a little tighter. "She's staying at the house for now, Bud." "Are we going back?" my daughter, Emily, asked, her small voice laced with uncertainty. I hesitated. I wanted to tell them everything. That their mother had betrayed me, betrayed them in a way, too. That she had checked out of our lives long before I walked out that door. But they were too young for that. So instead, I said, "Not for a while. We're going to stay with Grandma for now." They both nodded, but I could tell the wheels in their little heads were turning. When we pulled up to my mom's house, she was already outside, waiting on the porch like she had been standing there for hours. As soon as I got out, she pulled me into a tight hug. She didn't say anything, just held me. And for the first time since I discovered Lisa's betrayal, I felt like I could breathe. The kids ran inside, happy to see Grandma, but Mom stayed with me on the porch, watching them go. She finally looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "What happened, Mark?" I swallowed hard. "Lisa cheated. For a year." Her face hardened. "That selfish little," she stopped herself, closing her eyes for a moment before exhaling sharply. "And now?" "I've got a lawyer," I said. "I want full custody." She nodded, approving. "Good. You're doing the right thing." I ran a hand through my hair. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mom." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've been a father longer than Lisa's been a cheater. You'll be fine." I let out a shaky breath. "She's going to fight me." "She can try," Mom said coldly. "But a woman who prioritizes her affair over her children isn't as strong as she thinks." The words hit me hard because I knew she was right. Lisa had spent a year sneaking around, making excuses, pulling away. The second I called her bluff and walked out, she barely put up a fight. But I knew that wouldn't last. She'd realize soon enough what this meant. What losing control over the narrative would feel like. And when she did, she'd come back swinging. I wasn't sure if I was ready. But for my kids, I had to be. I barely had time to settle in at my mom's before my phone started blowing up. Lisa had finally realized what was happening. First, it was texts. "Lisa, we need to talk." "Lisa, Mark, this isn't fair." "Lisa, you can't just take them away from me." Then the calls started. I ignored the first few, but eventually, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, so I stepped outside onto the porch and answered. "Lisa," I said, my voice flat. You had no right, she snapped immediately. You took the kids without even discussing it with me. I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice calm. I told you last night I was going to take them. You didn't stop me. I didn't think you were serious, she practically shouted. I let out a bitter laugh. That's the problem, Lisa. You never take anything seriously until it's too late. Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. They're my children, Mark. And they're mine, too, I shot back. Where was this energy when you were out screwing around? When you were lying to me for a year? You had all that time to put your kids first, and you didn't. Don't act like I'm the bad guy for doing it now. Her voice cracked. I never stopped loving them. Maybe, I admitted. But you stopped acting like it. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her tone was different, less angry, more desperate. I just need time, Mark. Please. We can figure this out without lawyers. I sighed, rubbing my forehead. Lisa, you didn't even try to stop me last night. You didn't fight for them then. Why should I believe you're going to fight for them now? She didn't answer right away. But when she did, it wasn't what I expected. Because I don't want to lose everything. Not because I love them. Not because I'm their mother. But because she didn't want to lose. And that told me everything I needed to know. I exhaled, my decision solidifying. I'll see you in court, Lisa. Before she could say another word, I hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time, knowing I had just thrown the first real punch in a battle that was about to get ugly. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was the one in control. The moment I hung up on Lisa, I knew there was no turning back. She wasn't upset because she missed the kids. She was upset because she was losing control. That was Lisa in a nutshell. She never cared about the damage she caused until it came back to bite her. I walked back inside, finding my mom in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids. She glanced up at me, taking one look at my face and sighing. She called. I nodded, leaning against the counter. She's pissed. Mom smirked. Good. She should be. I ran a hand down my face. She wants to figure this out without lawyers. Mom scoffed. Which means she knows she'll lose. That hit me hard. Lisa wasn't stupid. She knew her absence over the past year was working against her. She had barely been around, and now she was scrambling to act like she cared before it was too late. Too bad for her, I wasn't playing along. I need to get things moving, I muttered. I have to get to a lawyer today. Mom nodded. I'll watch the kids. You do what you have to do. I looked over at Ethan and Emily, sitting at the table, happily eating pancakes like their world hadn't just flipped upside down. They trusted me to handle this. I wasn't going to let them down. By noon, I was sitting across from my lawyer, a man named David Brooks. He was in his late 40s, sharp-eyed, and had the calm, calculating demeanor of someone who had seen it all before. He glanced through the notes he had taken during our last call. So, Lisa moved out voluntarily? I nodded. She didn't even fight me when I left with the kids. David tapped his pen against his desk. That works in our favor. It shows a lack of urgency on her part. Courts don't like parents who seem indifferent. I leaned forward. I need full custody, David. He nodded. Then we need to build a case. We have a few things working for us, her absence, her infidelity, and the fact that she let you take the kids without resistance. But we need more. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I had created the night before. Screenshots. Messages. Photos. I slid the phone across the desk. She's been gone a lot. Nights out. Trips. I documented every time she was absent when she should have been home with the kids. David scrolled through the evidence, nodding in approval. This is good. But we need statements. Do you have anyone who can confirm her behavior? Jake, I said without hesitation. He saw everything. And my mom, she's watched me pick up Lisa's slack for years. David made some notes. Good. I'll reach out to them. He looked up at me. Lisa will fight back, Mark. She might not have cared last night, but when she realizes this is real, she'll come for whatever she can. I clenched my fists. She's not getting my kids. David gave me a small nod. Then let's make sure of it. As I walked out of his office, I felt it, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. Lisa had played her game for too long. Now. It was my turn. I barely made it home before Lisa struck back. It started with an email from her lawyer. The subject line alone made my stomach twist: custody and asset discussion, urgent. I opened it. Straight to the point. Lisa is seeking shared custody of the children and an equal division of all marital assets. Please provide a time for negotiation before we escalate to formal court proceedings. I gritted my teeth. So she had lawyered up. I had expected it, but the speed at which she moved told me everything. She was panicking. She wasn't fighting for the kids. She was fighting to keep control. Not even an hour later, my phone buzzed. Lisa. I sighed and answered. What now? Her voice was calm, eerily so. Mark, we don't have to do this like enemies. I let out a dry laugh. Enemies? Lisa, you cheated on me for a year and barely acted like a mother. Now you suddenly care. She exhaled sharply. You took them, Mark. What did you expect me to do? Just let you steal my kids? I clenched my jaw. I didn't steal them. I saved them. Her tone turned sharp. Oh, don't act like I was some abusive mother. I love them. Then why weren't you around? I snapped. Why were they always with me while you were out doing whatever the hell you wanted? Silence. She didn't have an answer. I pressed on. You didn't even try to stop me that night, Lisa. You just let me walk out with them. Why? Because you didn't want to deal with it. Because you thought I'd come crawling back. Another pause. Then, quietly, I didn't think you'd actually leave. I closed my eyes, exhaling through my nose. Well, I did. And I'm not coming back. Her voice hardened. You really think you're getting full custody? Courts don't just give fathers everything, Mark. I smirked, despite my anger. I think the courts will see exactly what I see, a mother who checked out a long time ago and a father who never did. She let out a bitter laugh. So you're perfect now? No, I admitted. But I was there. And that's more than you can say. Another long silence. Then, her voice wavered. I don't want to lose them, Mark. For a brief second, something in me hesitated. Was this the real Lisa? The one I married? The one who actually cared? But then I remembered the texts. The lies. The way she let me walk out without a fight. I hardened my voice. You already did. I hung up. She wanted a war. She had one. Lisa didn't call again after I hung up. Instead, she let her lawyer do the talking. By the next morning, David, my lawyer, called me. Lisa's filing for joint custody. She's claiming you took the kids without consent and that you're trying to alienate them from her. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Alienate them? She alienated herself. David sighed. She's playing defense. She knows she can't argue she's been a great mother, so she's going to try to make you look like the unreasonable one. I clenched my jaw. What do we do? We counter with what we have, her absence, her sudden attempt to fight now when she didn't care before, her affair. It won't guarantee full custody, but it weakens her case. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. And if she fights dirty? She will. His voice was firm. But that's why I need you to be careful. She's going to try to paint you as unstable, controlling, maybe even dangerous. That hit hard. Lisa had never once accused me of anything like that before, but I wouldn't put it past her now. David continued, do not give her anything she can use. No yelling. No threats. No angry texts. Stay calm, and document everything. I exhaled. Got it. When I hung up, I just sat there, staring at my phone. I knew Lisa. She wasn't fighting for the kids, she was fighting for control. She didn't like losing. She didn't like being the one left behind. And now that I had actually left, she wanted to win. But this wasn't about winning or losing. This was about my kids. And I wasn't backing down. That afternoon, I got a text from Jake. Jake, you need to come to O'Malley's. Now. O'Malley's was a bar downtown. I frowned at my phone. Me, why? Jake, just get here. Something felt off, but I trusted Jake. So I got in my car and drove. When I walked into the bar, my stomach dropped. Lisa was there. And she wasn't alone. She was sitting at a corner booth with her lawyer and him. The guy she cheated with. Jake was standing near the bar, arms crossed, watching them like a hawk. When he saw me, he muttered, I figured you'd want to see this for yourself. I didn't move. I just watched. Lisa was laughing. Not just laughing, flirting. Her hand was on the guy's arm, her body language completely relaxed. And just like that, I knew. She wasn't devastated about losing our family. She wasn't fighting for the kids because she missed them. She was playing a game. And she thought I was stupid enough to fall for it. I turned to Jake. Get a picture. His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded, pulling out his phone and snapping a few shots. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about proving who Lisa really was. And she had just given me exactly what I needed. I stood there in O'Malley's, watching Lisa lean into the man she had destroyed our family for, laughing like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't torn apart 15 years of marriage, like she wasn't in the middle of a custody battle, like she wasn't trying to convince a judge that she was the better parent. Jake nudged me. You good? Good? No. But I was clear. For the first time since this entire nightmare started, I wasn't confused or hurting. I wasn't questioning what had gone wrong or whether I had missed the signs. I wasn't doubting myself. Lisa had just confirmed exactly what I had known all along. She wasn't fighting for the kids. She was fighting for control. And now, she had lost both. I nodded at Jake. Let's go. He raised an eyebrow. You don't want to. No, I turned away, pushing open the door and stepping into the crisp evening air. I don't need to say anything. She just gave me all the proof I need. Jake followed me to the car, still looking like he was waiting for me to explode. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Those pictures, I said, getting into the driver's seat. Send them to me. I'll forward them to my lawyer. Jake smirked. That's cold, man. I met his gaze. She did this to herself. By the time I got home, David, my lawyer, had already responded to the email I sent him with the photos attached. David, this is exactly what we needed. I'll draft a response for the custody hearing. Be ready, she won't take this well. I set my phone down, breathing deeply. I wasn't afraid of Lisa's reaction anymore. She had spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough, like I was the problem, like I was the one who let our marriage die. And for a long time, I believed her. I let her rewrite history in my head. Not anymore. Not when I had proof of exactly who she had become. The kids were asleep, and my mom was in the kitchen when my phone rang. Lisa. I debated ignoring it, but no, I wanted to hear how she was going to spin this. I answered. What do you want, Lisa? There was silence on the line. Then, finally, a soft, measured voice. You went to a bar tonight. I smirked. So did you. She exhaled, her tone still eerily calm. You had someone following me? No, I said plainly. Jake happened to be there. But now that you mention it, maybe I should have hired a private investigator. Would have made this whole process easier. Her composure cracked just slightly. You sent those pictures to your lawyer, didn't you? I did. Jesus, Mark. She let out a bitter laugh. Do you really hate me that much? I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temple. Hate you? No. I pity you. She scoffed. Oh, come on. You could have had everything, Lisa, I said, my voice quieter now. A family. A marriage. A life with people who loved you. But you threw it away. And for what? Some guy who won't even be around in 6 months. Her breathing wavered, but she stayed silent. I pressed on. You spent a year sneaking around. A year lying to my face, lying to our kids, lying to yourself. And now, when it's all crumbling around you, you want to act like I'm the one being cruel? She exhaled shakily. Mark, I don't. No, Lisa, I cut her off. I don't care anymore. More silence. Then, a quiet admission, I messed up. I laughed under my breath. Yeah. You did. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. That's the thing, I said. It didn't just happen. You chose this. Over and over again. And now you don't get to play the victim. Another pause. Then, softer, do you really think I'll lose? I didn't hesitate. Yes. She sniffled, and for a moment, I thought she was crying. But if she was, I didn't feel anything for her anymore. Goodbye, Lisa, I said. And for the last time, I hung up. The custody battle lasted months, but in the end, the judge saw the same thing I did. Lisa had abandoned our family long before she had physically walked out. I was granted full custody. She got limited visitation. No overnights, no major decision-making power. And just like that, Lisa's perfect little world crumbled. She spiraled. Spent all her money, tried to drag out the legal process with appeals she couldn't afford. Eventually, even her affair partner left her. She tried, once, to come back, to act like she had changed, like she regretted everything. But regret didn't undo what she had done. And I had finally moved on.